Hello and welcome to Focus on Fantasy Romance, episode number 32, a podcast where we discuss books, genre, industry, and our geeky lives. I'm your host, Elle Klaus.
I'm A.R.D. Clerk.
I'm Paulina Woods.
And today we are talking about reader expectations. It's kind of the unspoken contract between a reader and an author, and this was spurred on by an author rant she will remain unnamed. But we got to talking about that kind of unspoken social contract between when a reader picks up a book and kind of what they expect. So we're going to start with kind of a broad view of you pick up any genre book. What do you expect when you pick that up? The rant in particular was going off about a cliffhanger. And I'm going to start with saying I don't agree with cliffhangers if they're done in such a way where the story of the original, like the story of the novel, isn't wrapped up. Like you can leave a cliffhanger at the end if it's like hinting at future adventures, but not a complete cliffhanger of the issues that were going on in that book. I don't think I'm alone. Everybody's muted. But I think when you pick up a book, you're like, okay, I have a complete story in my hands. And I think that when an author does a cliffhanger where the main issue isn't resolved, it's a breach of contract, and the reader has every right to be pissed off. Amy?
I would agree with you. When I pick up a book, it doesn't matter what genre it is. Actually, if I pick up any source of reading material, there's one thing I expect, and that's that, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I want the author, whether he's writing a journal article in Scientific America or whether he's writing a 375-page novel, I want him to start at, I don't care if he starts at the end, but there has to be a beginning to the story, a middle to the story, and an end to the story. And I don't mind reading series novels, where, like you said, if it hints at a future adventure and then the next book is the adventure and then an adventure and an adventure, that's fine with me. I'm not a fan of cliffhangers where I'm at the height of the action and something, really interesting is about to happen and the writer shuts me down. I don't like that. I want to have some resolution, whether it's just, temporary resolution. They're like, the battle's over, but the war's just begun. To me, that's still a resolution of what's been going on in the story. Yes, I know there's more to come, but what I've been experiencing as the reader in the story should be completed at that point. So I do want to have some type of resolution. I would like to have characters, whether they are real, imaginary, inanimate. I don't care if it's told from the toaster's point of view. If it's not just constant exposition and description, there has to be, for me, I prefer at least some characters and some interaction in there. P, anything specific you expect when you pick up a book?
A good story. I don't care really if it's a cliffhanger. I don't care if it's short, if it's long. I just want a story that'll take me away. And I'm such an avid reader, as you guys know. I can read a 300 book in 300-page book in 3 hours or 2 hours. So, if it grabs my attention and I look at the clock and I'm like, oh crap, I'm an hour in. When it ends, I'm like, all right, either I buy the next book because it was really interesting, or I wait a while. And to me, I've read them with cliffhangers and I just wait for the next book. And I'm like, all right, well, let's go back to the last chapter. All right, that's where I was. Let's pick it up and go. So maybe I'm just one of those weird readers out there that don't really care. Because I've never had a problem with cliffhangers. I've never wanted to write the author and rant out or get mad, or I'm not ever going to read anything from her again. I'm like, all right, let's wait for the next one to come out. So yeah, I'm good with it.
So in this author rant, she said that, if you watch a television series, they use cliffhangers all the time, or a hook, I think is the term. And I'm like, well, That's fine for a television series, or if you're writing if you're reading what you know is a serial. But if you pick up a book, it's a movie, to me. I mean, it's long enough to be books are made into movies. So if I pick up a book, it is a movie, and if it doesn't have an ending, it's not a complete movie. Like, I would not pay. Geez, movie prices are like $18. It's ridiculous. But I would not pay that and go sit in a movie theater and have them like cut off the last 20 minutes of the movie. Like, oh, you got to come back in a year and watch the rest. So, yeah, I don't think that argument was very valid. I think that, I don't know, Paulina, you said like, I want a good story, but to me, a story includes an ending.
Yes and no. I think maybe because I'm an avid primetime watcher, I literally, on a good night, I'm recording 6 or 7 shows. Don't judge me. And so I guess I'm in that mindset where they do cut off. There's a difference between a movie and a TV show. And I think that's why in my brain, if a book cuts off, I'm just like, all right, I'll wait for the next one. Because I'm used to waiting, like my favorite shows, just like 3 of my favorite shows just went off on huge cliffhangers, and I'm just like, all right, I'll wait for the next one. And the same thing happens when I'm reading a book. I'm like, oh my God, it's so good. I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't wait. And I'm analyzing over, and I'm like, okay, this just happened. What's going to happen? When the next book comes out, I go and watch it. But it just might be my mindset, like I said, because I watch so many shows, I'm used to it. Now, if I went to a movie, it'll be different. Even though some
Do
of
you
them
think that with the prevalence of independent published books, that the cliffhanger is on a rise? Because I will admit that most of what I read growing up was everything I read growing up was traditionally published because I had to get it from the library, and up until a few years ago, you couldn't get independently published stuff into a library. So everything I picked up was, it had a concrete ending. And the traditional publishing industry has a tendency to, if book 1 doesn't sell like a big gangbusters, they don't care if it has a cult loyal following. They will not publish book 2. So I don't recall ever reading a cliffhanger ending. So do you think that because independent authors can publish quicker and publish regardless of the sales of the first book, that the cliffhanger ending is on the rise?
I think because they have to publish so fast that cliffhangers are coming in. Readers are coming to expect a book out within 6 months of the first book coming out. And I think instead of authors actually finishing up a book all the way, they're like, well, they'll throw in a cliffhanger just because they didn't finish the book and then start the next book, which, it picks up where the other book left off. Sometimes you'll read like a book 1 and book 2 and you're like, wait, you could have just combined these 2 books. And so I think maybe it's not the fact that, the author's like, well, they'll buy the second book if it's a cliffhanger. It's more, let me get a book out there before my walls are beaten down by readers saying, hey, where's the book? Where's the book? But like, I have a favorite author who publishes 1 book a year in the summer, and I follow her on Facebook, and I'm happy with it. So I mean, I think it's just the expectations of readers wanting to know, if I don't hear from my author in a year, I'm not going to follow them anymore. So authors are afraid of losing that, and so it's not real. So they're starting to break books up. Instead of having 2 books, having 1 book, it's 2 now. Or, well, this book is 160K. Well, I can break that into 3. So maybe that's what's going on. Go ahead, Amy.
I can tell you something that truly pisses me off as a reader, and this has happened. There's specifically one I can think of. So Melanie Ron has The Exiles, which was supposed to be a trilogy. And book 3, The Capitol's Tower, has been supposedly in the works for like literally the last 15 years. So I have had book 1 and 2 on my bookshelf since I was in college, expecting book 3 of this fabulous fantasy series to come out. There's a blog post from July 2014 where it's like, Melanie Ron promises she's going to write The Capitol's Tower. It is now June 2017, and the friggin' Capitol's Tower is still not published. That is what pisses me off. If I am reading a cliffhanger, cliffhangers don't usually bother me too much. I prefer to have a book that ends, but if I'm like, oh, but if I read a cliffhanger and then it's 900 years before the author puts out another book, if they ever do at all, or they move on to something else, or they're like, screw that, I'm not going to finish that series, that does not make me happy.
I follow Christine, not Christine Feehan, Sharon Kenyon, and I've been to a lot of her signings. There's one series of hers where I think there's only 2 books in it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that came up was, are you going to finish it? And she goes, honestly, I want to, but the timing is off to finish this series. And so she literally, oh my God, that was a wrong name. Sorry, Robin D. Owens. And so she said the timing is off because of like the political unrest. And she goes, I just don't want to deal with the backlash. She hasn't finished it. She has no plans to. And I'm telling you right now, that landed on a cliffhanger where like the pup went back and you're just like, oh my God, what happened? And I mean, I know now she's probably never going to finish it. So I can understand your frustration, Amy, but sometimes it's things beyond the control of the author. How many times have your character stopped talking to you and you have no idea how to pick it up? Do you want a forced book? And that's what readers have to realize.
I think too, this happens a lot more often in indie readers, in indie writing, than we think about it, because I mean the market is so flooded with people. But I see all the time where readers have, found 1 or 2 books by this indie author. They're like, oh my God, when's the next book coming out? I don't write anymore. I don't publish anymore. The readers are like, what the like, I loved your 2 books. Why are you not publishing anymore? And I mean, there's lots of reasons people don't publish anymore. They may not be making enough money, or there's something happened in their life that got in the way, or so things like that do happen. But I think there's a lot more of those out there floating around than what we think, because I know I've picked up a book here or there from some author I never heard of. Like, oh, this is really good. And went to look and they had nothing else out. I mean, it probably came out 12 years ago. They published 1 book, never published anything else. I don't know if they died. I don't know if they stopped publishing or whatever the course was, but I think it happens more often than not now that there's a huge influx of indie authors out there too.
Elle?
Well, I think that to follow up on what Amy said, that there's a lot of misconception about how being an author works. Like, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to publish this 1 book and I'm going to make millions of dollars. And I'm like, no, you're not. That's just not going to happen. It's a nice pipe dream, but no. So I think you get a lot of people that like write 1 or 2 books and they're like, why aren't I a millionaire? I'm going to quit. Well, if that was how they felt, they weren't in it for the right reasons. I write stories because if I don't write stories, they just stay in my head and drive me nuts. I'm not crazy, but yeah, so I think that the influx of independently published stories has led more to the cliffhanger. And from a marketing standpoint, I understand why cliffhangers work, because they do get the reader to follow to the next book, to the next book, to the next book. But I also understand why it makes a reader angry, because there's a difference in what the reader expects and what the author is trying to do. Like, the author has every right to write her books in any manner that she wants. But also the reader has every right to leave, 1-star reviews for a cliffhanger ending. Okay, I think we can segue.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to segue into a little bit more genre-specific topic about romance specifically. So when you pick up a romance genre book, there is one thing that has to happen in a romance genre book, and that is the happily ever after or the happy for now. And the happy for now ending is one where you close the book and you're like, they're together. They can either stay together for the rest of their lives, or somebody can throw a wrench in it and there's book 2. But there was some commotion about whether or not she had an HEA. This is the same author, they ranted, by the way, that an HEA or an HFN in this book. And she's like, I don't have to tell you that in the blurb. I'm like, I'm sorry. If you stick it in romance, it's implied. I know that if I want to read a scary book, I can go grab most of Stephen King's stuff. If I want a fantasy, I can grab something by Sanderson. You know, there's these genre expectations that the author, they can bend, but they need to understand the rules first before they can bend them. And just saying, you know, waving the finger at your audience, saying, hey, this is romantic suspense, but there's no happy ever anything. It's really kind of insulting.
I think this
romance.
Right. She has a readership that is used to her romance novels. So when you have a readership used to something that you write and you're going to go off grid and write something that's different, and this is coming from somebody who writes whatever. So my readers wouldn't know the difference if I did something different. But if you're writing all the time one thing and you decide, okay, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So let's say you write comedy romance and now you're going to write a romance suspense. It's probably a good idea to at least tell your readers this is a little bit different than what you're used to. Whether you do it in the blurb, whether you get on social media and say, this is my new book. Hey, guys, it's a little bit different than what I normally write, so that you don't get one-starred when they're like, what the fuck is this? This is not what I'm used to when I go buy blah, blah, blah. It'd be like if I went to buy Stephen King and all of a sudden Stephen King is writing, you know,
Rainbows and Unicorns.
Yeah. You know, I screwed my stapler. I would be like, Stephen King, what drugs are you on? Can I have? No, I'm just kidding. But I would not have expected that when I went to buy that, because from Stephen King, you expect A and B and C, but not a whole lot of D. You know what I'm saying? So, pun intended.
I don't want Stephen King to give me D.
Right. Lots and lots of D. But that's the thing. So I think that her readers were also a little bit thrown off by the fact that they always get something, probably happily ever after. I can't tell you for sure because I really have not read any of her stuff, but I'm pretty sure she probably usually gives them a happily ever after, and this time she did not, and there was no warning, and there was no, hey guys, this is a little bit different. It was, check out my new book, and then everybody's like, oh, her new book, I love all of her other books, and then they pick it up and it's completely different. I think that's probably where some of the miscommunication happened too.
Oh yeah, if I had decided to write, I don't know, horror novels and I sent it out to my newsletter, I would say this is not romance. Because when you have even those two genres that you mentioned, like contemporary romance, and then she writes romantic suspense. Romantic suspense is still a subcategory of romance. You still need the HFN or the HEA, or it's breach of contract. So
I agree.
Paulina,
right. If you're gonna read a romance or write a romance,
if you're going to say that it's a romance in any capacity, it has to have an HEA. You can say it's fantasy with romantic elements. That doesn't require a happily ever after. But if you say this is fantasy romance, you need a happily ever after, or you're going to have cranky readers. Paulina is eating.
Yes.
Did you have an opinion to share on the topic?
Do you disagree?
I don't care. I'm literally one of those funny readers. Like, I have read, like, I was trying to think of an example. 10 Leagues to Boston. Have you guys ever read that book?
Mm-mm.
It's not, it's a romance now that I'm older and I know this, but it's about a teen and his sister and brother team that decides to go to Boston in the dead of winter it's like way back when. And then they meet like a trapper and another man, and they travel together, and suspense. And I'm just like, at the very end, I love the book. At the very end, it's not really resolved. You think she's going to get with one of the guys. Probably. She's like 15, but, it was back when they did that. So it was acceptable. And I'm trying to think. Last time I read it, I was a little older, and I was like, wait a minute. Like, who is she gonna? Which one? And it ended, and it still left the reader going, well, and I'll still pick it up today and read it. So,
is it shelved in romance, or is it shelved in historical drama, historical fiction,
Honey,
something?
now it's shelved in. Please don't read. This is so outdated. I think it was written in it was written in, oh my god. It was written in the beginning of the 19th century. So, I mean, it was written a long time ago. But I mean, I would classify it as probably romantic adventure only because the whole thing is seen from her point of view and she falls in like, you know what I mean? She falls in love or whatever along the way and they kind of have their moments that's not really moments cuz it's clean romance too. But it doesn't end with a they get there they get there with the father and all the other stuff, but it doesn't end with them actually saying this is who she chooses. So I'm thinking back to my childhood and like that book, and I'm just like, to me, yes, it should resolve, but I have a good enough imagination to be like, I want her with this guy. I'm good with it. I wanted her with the bad guy, so I'm pretty sure the author probably would have gave her to the good guy, and I've been pissed. So, I mean, again, I'm a unique reader, very unique reader.
Yeah, I would have if I got an unsatisfactory ending to a book I was reading. We're like, oh, we're just going to mentally change that so that it's the way I want it anyway.
I have in the past. You know, that's the difference, though. I think too is I would never probably email an author. I probably would not even give a bad review for what I considered an unsatisfactory ending. I have been upset at endings that I'm like, what are you thinking? Why did you do this? Like, I have ugly cried before and been like, oh my God, you just broke me completely apart. But there have been times where I wanted to throw the book at the wall because I'm like, that's not the way it's supposed to go. But I'm also like, kind of like with it enough to know like it's not my story, it's their story, so they can do whatever they want to with it. So I probably wouldn't like rant or give a bad review or anything like that. But I would be dissatisfied, and I am not sure that I would pick up anything else by that author again. I mean, Dean Koontz I did, but he's Dean Koontz, so.
We also live in a very, like, when I was growing up, authors, internet, we didn't have internet when I was growing up. I guess I'm that old. But, we didn't, if we had an author we liked, we didn't go stalk them on social media. We had no way of communicating with the author unless we wanted to sit down and write a letter and mail it to their publisher, or if they were the sort that actually had contact information in their books. We had no way to interact with the author, and we had no way to write our own reviews. Like, the Amazon platform has really kind of changed everything, because now you can leave a review on any product that they sell. Whereas before, I used to go into a bookstore, grab a book off the shelf. If I liked it, I bought it. And then if I didn't like it, or I did like it enough to tell somebody about it, it would all be word of mouth. It wouldn't be anything written down. Maybe when the internet was new, I would get this GeoCities website and write up what I thought about the book, but no one would look at it. So the idea of the reviews being directly conveyed to the author, and then the author being able to turn around and spew something onto social media about how she thinks it's unfair, that is relatively new.
Yeah, but also readers have gotten more malicious. Like you said, like when we used to read, if I didn't like a book, roses. Can't remember the author's name, but roses. I swear I love the concept of the book, but there was no warning in there that it was rape. Any warning whatsoever. And I read it as a 15-year-old girl. And basically this girl, she goes to this guy who's like this warrior, but he believes that a warrior owns his wife. And so then if she did something wrong, he would put a chain around her neck and put her in the rushes. Really. And so, I would skip over parts because I'm like, oh God, that's bad. And now looking back on that, I'm like, can you imagine if she would have published this book in our day and age, when readers can literally just go and be like, holy crap, what the fuck are you writing? And I'm even like to myself, I finished that book and I went back and I just skipped over the parts I didn't like to read it again. And I never at any point thought, hey, I should write the author. I should write the publisher. Be like, what are you writing? I just skipped over what I didn't like, and there's no triggers on it.
Trigger
And
warnings are a fairly new concept as well. There was not a trigger warning on Carrie when Stephen King put bullying in his book. There was not a trigger warning on there that this might cause some bullied teen to commit suicide. There are not trigger warnings on anything until very recently when
I don't want trigger warnings because I want to be able to read it and discover and be like, oh, and if there's something that makes me feel like, oh my God, I can't read it, skip. All right, we're good. I'm really good at doing that.
Part of the issue of needing a trigger warning is that people are not properly shelving their books when they are dark or when they are certain things. They'll shelve them in romance. Sorry, babe, this is not romance. Not my idea of romance, not my definition of romance. But everybody else's definition might be different. Right, exactly. So they do, like, they have dark romance and they have all these other things. Well, it might not be my idea of romance, but the author thinks it is. So the trigger warnings didn't really come about until, we had
whiny little babies.
Lots of...
No, it's not an issue of whiny little babies. It's an issue of someone has lived a very traumatic event and they grab a romance novel thinking, hey, I'm going to escape. No, this guy just gang raped this chick. So yeah, like I've read books where I'm like, wait a minute, this is rape fantasy. This is not romance. If this happened to me, I would be freaking the hell out and screaming bloody murder. So yeah, there needs to be a little bit more tact when you publish your romance because not everybody's going to be on the same page. And a lot of people read romance to escape their problems, to escape their stresses in life. And the last thing I want as an author, the last thing I want to do is just make people revisit a traumatic event because I didn't tell them, hey, this deals with, and it doesn't even have to be an explicit like trigger warning, this can be like, this has, dubious consent, or this has adult situations involving, whatever. It doesn't have to be specific, but just enough to say, hey, if you were molested as a child, this is not a good fit for you.
Yeah. But
that's the point. I've read books with that in it before with no trigger warnings, and I'm okay. So.
Right, but we're also in an age where we're wrestling with the fact that we used to brush everything under the rug, like, oh, you were raped, just don't tell anybody, and it didn't happen.
But I didn't. I don't know.
Now we're dealing with social issues, and these are serious social issues, and they.
Okay, you do realize I went through half of these issues, and my mom never swept them under the rug. I had to talk about them in a police station. I had to talk about them to counselors. I still have problems from them. If I don't like if I'm reading a book and I'm like, oh God, no. I just put it down and continue instead of blasting it all over everywhere. Hey, this is horrible. I'm just like, okay, it happened.
Right, but it sounds like you actually got the help that you kind of needed, where some people are just like, shut up, it didn't happen, I don't want to hear about it. It makes me uncomfortable that you were raped, I don't want to hear about it.
Right. Well, when I wrote Forged in Fire, my main character, the female main character, my hero had actually left her in a prison camp, a POW camp, and she was raped, and I did not go into any details. The story starts out 5 years afterwards. She has a child, not a child of rape, from the hero who left her in the prison camp. She was very much not really destroyed by it, but she lost everything except for her child. And so I had to be pretty cognizant of the fact that, like, yeah, she's a strong woman and she has gone through all these things. It still affects her in a lot of ways. And so, I had to be also cognizant of the fact that I didn't want to give any explicit details. Basically, I was just like, this is what happened in the past, because I didn't want to flash back to it. I didn't want to, you know what I mean? I was trying to be make it, because that was part of the story, and there was no way around the fact that this is what happened. But I didn't want to give readers, you know, I didn't want to muddy my romance with this horrible thing that happened in the past.
It just sounds like politically correct bullshit, man. Sorry. I have a strong opinion about this, so I will just sit over here and eat my chocolate.
I mean, it is politically correct.
Bullshit.
She was what she was, and she did what she did, and she talked about it and went on with her life. And 5 years later, you know, she still knows what happened, and it happened. But I didn't feel the need to like put it all out there like it was, you know, A, B, C, and D. Like, I didn't feel like I needed to describe it, which happens sometimes. I think when they use rape as a, you know, like an arc for their character, sometimes they get too involved in the descriptions of what happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then that's where the triggers come in for a lot of people who, you know, have been through those things. So I kind of glossed over the details of it and just was like, this is what happened, because the story actually does take place later. But I thought it was important. It was a thing that changed her as a character. I mean, I think it was an important thing for her to talk about and say, but, you know, she wasn't just like, oh yeah, I was raped. Oh, it was okay. Like, she didn't act, you know what I mean? People don't act that way. They're just like, I don't know. I didn't want it to be too heavy, but I also didn't want to pretend like, yeah, that was fine. It was okay. There's like a fine line between, you know?
Yeah, and I'm for trigger warnings, because even though I've not had anything traumatic happen to me, I still don't want to read that stuff. I don't want to.
There have been a couple of times
of imagination. I really don't.
Child abuse, I don't know. No, can't do it. Sorry.
Right.
I'm not even a big fan of animal abuse. I'm just like, he's beating his dog. I don't think I should watch this or read this.
Right, and that goes back to my, you know, people read to escape, and if there's certain things that they just don't want to read, they should kind of know what they're getting in for up ahead. Like we were talking before we started recording, that Paulina writes mail. And she says, oh, you don't read that stuff. I'm like, well, it's not that I don't read that stuff. It's just not my preference. If I had a choice between, you know, a male-female romance versus a male-male romance, I would gravitate towards male-female, because that is, I know that I would enjoy that. That's what I want. That's not to say I wouldn't read the male-male. If it had a compelling story, I would read it, but I still have my preferences. And that's the same with any content within any book. Like, I don't want rape. I don't want child molestation, you know.
Yeah, everybody has their preference of what topics they don't want to read, the same as they do with the topics they do.
Right. So even if you don't say, hey, trigger warning, blah, 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 you can say, well, this is a story dealing with XYZ topics.
Even if it's written into the blurb, just enough to give you a hint of like, okay, this might be something that I'm not so sure I want to read. Because I've come across a couple of those where the blurbs were well written. They didn't give away the story, they didn't give away what was going to happen, but it was, you know, it hinted at it enough to where I'm like, oh, so yeah, that might not be what I'm looking for. Because I am one of those people who wants to escape. I want to be that. I want to feel that mushy, like, oh, they fell in love. You know what I mean? Not like, murder that bastard. You know what I mean? Like, I don't usually read for that kind of feeling.
Like if I want to, like I said, if I want a scary book, I know where to go. If I want fantasy, I know where to go. If I want romance, it's more back to the kind of unspoken social contract. So Ish wanted to talk, and Ish is not here. Ish wanted to talk about erotic fiction versus erotica, and Paulina had a very simple definition. Because honestly, I write low heat romance, so like it's closed door. So like there's kissing and hugging, and then everything, like, you know what happens, but it's all closed door. There's no explicit descriptions. It's more about the emotional journey of the two couples. So Paulina had.
Yeah, and I've written low heat to mid heat. So there may be one sex scene on camera, everything else happens off screen.
I do nice high heat. Yeah, baby.
Yeah, but Paulina did have a good description of, because Elle and I were like, we don't even know the definition. We don't know the difference because we don't write it. So, but Paulina had a good description.
Oh, the porn clip one.
Yeah.
So basically, erotic is like when you're watching porn and you just do that little clip where all you see is the action, the bang, boom, bang. Whereas erotica is when it starts and he comes to the door and he's like, I have a package for you. And she's like, oh, but
Here's
I'm a
your
housewife.
pizza.
And I can't do that. He's all, but look at my package. Okay. So you're more invested. And
I mean,
so
there's plot.
that's what I just said. I just did it in man's voice.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So that's the difference to me. Just matters what you want to dive into. If you want to go and read from beginning to end and take a shower afterwards and smoke a cigarette, or if you want to be invested in your characters and you want to know what they're feeling, and as the sun glistened off her skin and he felt the goosebumps raise upon her arm, just matters. So there you go. That's the difference.
So now we know. Oh, I don't have anything to add because, like I said, this isn't my genre.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about erotic versus erotica either. So I don't really.
Right.
But
if an author picks it.
If you want one that, yes, I'm going to plug here, but for Renee Mason, she writes her Doctor trilogy is literally like you get invested in the characters, but you have to take a smoke, a bath, another smoke, go outside, maybe watch some porn afterwards because those don't read that in public. But she grabs, she really takes both of them and mixes both. Those they become a blur in her work. A very nice blur.
Very well. She writes erotic romance, so there's actually a happy ending. Where I don't think erotica requires happy ending. I think it requires.
No, I think they can
growth.
slam, ma'am, thank you, ma'am, and walk away. Yeah.
No, that's erotic. Erotica still requires character growth, so the character has to grow in some way. And I don't mean the D, throughout the story. But she writes erotic romance. It's very, very high heat. But over the course of the right. But at least she has very tasteful covers too. It's not like all man titty.
Yeah, but see, it doesn't matter what the cover is, people will notice what you're reading and you'll be like, oh, ooh. They'll be like, ma'am, are you okay?
There's a reason my cheeks are all blushing. Okay, and unless anyone has anything else to add about reader expectations, I think we can get into our news because this being a topic-based podcast, I meant to do news at the beginning, but totally forgot. Did anyone have anything else on the topic?
Nope.
No.
Does anyone have any news?
No.
Big fat no from me.
Nope. Wow,
nope.
I have nothing coming out in the next 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah,
well,
I made the realization today.
Go ahead.
One at a time.
Sorry. I made the realization today that I'm depressed because I'm not writing, and I'm not writing because I'm depressed. I have no idea how the fuck that actually works. But I'll have to
Welcome to my world.
Right?
Yeah, I finished Dark Star, went off to the Takamo editor. She's on vacation, so whenever she comes back and gets to it, then it'll be edited and then it'll come out and blah, blah, blah. And I'm supposed to be working on the third book, and I haven't started it yet. And I think part of my problem might be that because, I'll have all these plans of everything I want to do, and then I Netflix for the whole freaking day, so...
Right, and it's hard to get invested in the next story until the other one is done. Like, if you're waiting for the edits to come back, you'll be like, any day now. You're like, well, I don't want to start this big, long novel. If I have to stop, yeah.
I did finish my anthology story for the Love Through Heartache anthology or whatever that went off to my beta reader. And then she came back and she was like, isn't this story kind of familiar? And I'm like, well, it's kind of like a trope, so yeah. There's 50,000 stories with this same theme, but she was like, oh yeah, other than that, I liked it. And I was like, okay, good. So I didn't have to do she was just worried I was plagiarizing someone else's work. Like, no, I'm safe. It's a trope. It's okay.
Tropes.
Yeah.
Well, I did my anthology. It's a character from my world, and I decided to do a snapshot of what happened and how it affected some of the other gargoyles when the magic was sapped from the world. So it's an interesting story. As a guy, he's going to struggle. A male is going to struggle to accept his mate, accept the basically physical handicap that he gets, and losing his parents. So it's interesting, but it's a snapshot of just that second when, well, it's like the second it happened and the months after, basically, is what it's going to be. So look forward to that, I guess. I'm going to stay in the gargoyle world for a while.
Yeah, I cried writing mine, like, a lot. So I'm probably going to get, like, all this hate mail when it comes out. Like, what are you writing? Oh, my God, this is horrible. But ugly crying is good for the soul. I don't know.
You can blame it on me. You can just be like, that's what she picked for the theme.
Yeah, I broke his heart real good.
Well, I literally killed my hero, so.
Okay, you're evil.
It's okay.
Okay,
The cost
so
of a kiss.
Yep,
Yeah.
the cost of a kiss. So thank you for joining us. If you like the podcast, please like, comment, and share. This has been episode number 32. Good night.
Night.
Let's.